Have you ever met someone who just won't listen? Someone so convinced they're always right that they shut out everyone else. Today, I want to tell you the story of Amarachi, a girl whose stubbornness became her identity, a story that serves as a powerful lesson for all of us. From the time she was a little girl in Enugu, Amarachi earned a nickname, the girl that will not hear a word. This wasn't just a playful tag. It was a reputation she wore like a badge of honor. Her mother, Mama Ifioma, would often plead with her in frustration. Amara, N.E., Ikwanu Nti, listen. Amarachi would fire back. I've heard you. But the words never truly sank in. Her father's gentle corrections about her mistakes were always met with an argument. In Amarachi's world, her version of events was the only truth that mattered. This wasn't just childhood defiance. It was a core part of her personality. If her parents told her the stove was hot, she had to touch it just to prove them wrong, even if it meant getting burned. If they warned her a particular road was dangerous, she'd walk down it with her head held high, just to make a point. If anyone, dared to correct her pronunciation or her manners, she would hiss and walk away, indignant. People would whisper that Amarachi had a stubborn spirit, one far too heavy for her slender frame to carry. Her teachers in primary school spotted it immediately. When she was corrected for a wrong answer in class, she would insist she was right, even with zero proof. Imagine this. Her teacher would say patiently, Amarachi, 2 times 3 is not 8. And with unwavering confidence, she would respond, I wrote 8 because that's what I want to write. The other children would laugh, but their laughter meant nothing to her. In her mind, listening was a sign of weakness. Accepting correction meant admitting she didn't know everything, a reality she absolutely refused to entertain. Her stubbornness wasn't loud or aggressive. It was quiet, calm, and as unmovable as a mountain. She would look you directly in the eye while completely dismissing your advice, her gaze steady and unwavering. It was a chillingly effective way to shut down any conversation she didn't like. By the time Amarachi was a teenager, she had perfected this art of self-belief. She placed her own opinions on a pedestal, far above everyone else's. If her friends told her a dress didn't look good on her, she'd wear it the very next day, even more proudly. If her mother advised her against hanging out with certain friends, she would intentionally grow closer to them. When her father warned her to be careful with boys, she'd insist she knew exactly what she was doing. And here's the tricky part. Amarachi was beautiful. She was tall and slim, with a natural grace that made people turn their heads. Because of her beauty, many people excused her stubborn behavior. They brushed it off as confidence. Some even admired what they saw as her strong will. She tragically misunderstood this admiration. She thought it was validation, that they supported her choices and believed she was always right. In her mind, the entire world was supposed to revolve around her decisions. The real trouble started to brew when she turned 15. This is an age where most young people are still trying to figure out who they are and how the world works. But Amarachi? She believed she had it all figured out already. It was around this time she met Chaik, a handsome and gentle boy who was drawn to her innocent looks and what he mistook for confidence. They started walking home from school together, sharing jokes, dreams, and the quiet moments of young love. Chaik was genuinely kind, patient, and honest, a rare gem. He truly cared for her. But even his gentle nature couldn't penetrate Amarachi's armor. Whenever he tried to teach her something new or gently correct a mistake, she would wave him off with dismissal. Her inability to listen began to create tiny fractures in their budding relationship, fractures she was completely blind to. The stage was being set for a much bigger conflict, especially when her sister Uju would later interfere. But at that moment, Amarachi was about to make a decision that would define her entire adult life, and she wouldn't listen to a single soul telling her she might be making a monumental mistake. One afternoon, her aunt came to visit and witnessed Amarachi arguing with her mother over something completely trivial. The aunt, a wise woman who had seen much of life, let out a heavy sigh and said to no one in particular, "This girl's stubbornness will one day choke her future." Amarachi, overhearing this, just rolled her eyes and walked away, completely unfazed. She didn't realize how prophetic those words were. She couldn't see that the very stubbornness everyone warned her about would eventually cost her friendships, relationships, and years of potential happiness. But at 15, with her shoulders thrown back and her chin held high, Amarachi was certain of only one thing. The world was wrong, and she was right. Always. And so, her journey began. A journey shaped by her refusal to listen, one destined to teach her painful, life-altering lessons she never saw coming. It's a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about never being wrong. It's about having the humility to listen, to learn, and to grow. At 15, Amarachi felt like she was finally tasting the sweetest part of life, her first love. His name was Chike. He became the light she waited for after school, the reason she smiled at her phone, the boy whose footsteps she could recognize before even seeing him. He had this gentle voice, kind eyes, and a calmness that could soften even her most stubborn edges. He actually listened when she spoke. He would smile even when she was arguing about something silly. He tolerated her sharp tongue and her absolute certainty that she was always right. Chike was the very first person who made her feel truly seen, like she mattered. But the one person Amarachi trusted more than anyone else in the world, her older sister Uju, was about to shatter that beautiful feeling into a million pieces. Uju was everything Amarachi wanted to be. She was elegant, mature, beautiful, and so incredibly confident. People would always say, "Ah, Amarachi took after Uju." Growing up, Amarachi was Uju's shadow. She followed her everywhere, to the market, to church, to the salon. Whatever Uju said was gospel truth to her. She never argued with Uju the way she did with her parents. So, naturally, when she started dating Chike, she told Uju everything. Every single text message he sent, every conversation they had, every little promise they made to each other. Uju always listened with a warm smile, offering sisterly advice, making Amarachi feel safe and understood. Until one day, she gave the advice that would change everything. It happened on a Saturday evening. Amarachi had just come home, absolutely glowing. She was going on and on about how Chike had bought her chin-chin and walked her all the way home. Uju was sitting on the bed, quietly plaiting her hair, her expression unreadable. When Amarachi finally finished her story, Uju let out a long sigh. "Amara, you're too young for all this." Amarachi's smile faded. She frowned. "But he's a good boy. That is what they all say," Uju replied, her voice suddenly firm, almost cold. "You're only 15. If you continue like this, he will distract you. You need to focus on school." "But, no but, Amara. Leave Chike." The words hit Amarachi like a physical blow. But because she trusted Uju, because she had always looked up to her, she obeyed without a single question. She didn't ask for any more explanations. She didn't argue. She didn't even stop to consider her own feelings. For once in her life, she just listened. And it turned out to be the worst decision she would ever make. For the next 2 months, a painful silence fell between Amarachi and Chike. She noticed the changes immediately. He started avoiding her in the hallways at school. Whenever she did manage to pass by him, he looked guilty, unable to meet her eyes. He stopped smiling. He stopped greeting her. He stopped behaving like the kind, gentle boy she had known. At first, she told herself that he was just hurting from their breakup, just like she was. But then, the whispers started. Whispers in the schoolyard, whispers among friends. She tried her best to ignore them, to push them away. Until one day, she couldn't ignore it anymore. She saw the truth with her own two eyes. It was Uju and Chike. They were behind the church hall, laughing together. They were talking closely, standing in a way that was far too intimate for just friends. Amarachi froze. Her chest tightened so much she could barely breathe. Her hands started to tremble. She quickly hid behind a wall, her heart pounding in her ears, and watched as Uju collected something from Chike, maybe a note, or his phone number. It was the same boy Uju had told her to leave. The same boy she had dismissed as not being serious. The same boy Amarachi was still secretly crying over every single night. Her sister, her role model, her guide, betraying her in the worst way imaginable. That night, Amarachi couldn't hold it in any longer. She burst into the room they shared, her voice shaking with rage and hurt. "Uju, why were you with Chike today?" Uju just blinked slowly, as calm and collected as ever. "Amara, don't embarrass yourself. We're just friends. There's nothing more to it. You told me to leave him." Amarachi cried out, her voice cracking. "Yes," Uju said, her tone level. "And it was for your own good. But why are you talking to him now?" Amarachi pressed, desperate for an answer that made sense. Uju paused, her eyes becoming unreadable, distant. "Amara, You're just a child. When you grow up, you'll understand." Amarachi wanted to scream, to throw things, to demand a real answer. But her voice just faded away. She suddenly felt so small. Months passed. Rumors swirled, then solidified into truths. And finally, those truths became wedding announcements. Uju and Chaik were getting married. Just like that, at 19 years old, Chaik was no longer just the boy from next door. He was about to become Amarachi's brother-in-law. On the wedding day, the air was thick with celebration, music, and laughter. Amarachi stood quietly beside her mother, a silent observer at what felt like her own funeral. She watched Uju and Chaik on the dance floor, their movements synchronized, their faces alight with joy. In that moment, she felt completely invisible. Something deep inside her didn't just crack, it shattered into a million irreparable pieces. She swallowed her pain, a bitter pill that turned into a cold, hard anger. And right there, amidst the festivities, she made a vow that would echo through her entire adult life. Men cannot be trusted. Women deceive. Love is a lie. I will never open my heart again. And from that day forward, Amarachi changed. She locked her heart away and threw away the key. She hardened her mind against the world. She decided that only her thoughts, her feelings, and her will mattered, never anyone else's. Her long, lonely journey into isolation had begun. After Uju married Chaik, something profound shifted within Amarachi. It was a change so deep, so invisible, that no one around her could truly grasp its magnitude. This wasn't just simple heartbreak. It was a betrayal that had cut to the very core of her being. Her first love had become her sister's husband. The person she looked up to, her role model, had become her rival. The trust she had so freely given had become her undoing. Amarachi didn't have a dramatic outburst. There were no loud cries, no screams of rage, no further confrontations. Instead, she just shut down. It was as if she'd commissioned an invisible architect to build a fortress around her heart. The walls were thick, constructed from silent anger, cold pride, and an unbreakable, unyielding stubbornness. As she grew from a teenager into a young woman, those internal walls began to manifest as external behaviors. She stopped listening to anyone's advice, no matter how well-intentioned. She stopped believing the words people said, viewing every statement with suspicion. She stopped giving anyone the benefit of the doubt. The world was guilty until proven innocent, and in her court, no one was ever proven innocent. If someone dared to suggest she might be wrong about something, her heart would instantly harden. Her mother would start gently. "Amara, maybe you should consider," but would be cut off with a sharp, "No, I know what I'm doing." Her father would try to caution her. "This path you are taking, my daughter," and she would reply without even looking up, "That is your opinion." Her friends, the ones who had been her confidants, began to drift away. Every conversation felt like a battle, a test of wills she was determined to win. There was no softness left in her voice, no space in her mind for correction, and absolutely no room in her life for vulnerability. Her stubbornness, once just a quirky childhood habit, had morphed into a shield, a heavy suit of armor she wore proudly every single day. The betrayal she felt from Uju and Chaik didn't stay confined to them. It planted a poisonous seed in her mind, and its roots spread wide and deep. Instead of seeing their actions as a personal, specific wrongdoing, she generalized the blame. It wasn't just Chaik who had lied, it was all men. All men are liars, she'd tell herself. All men are the same. No man deserves my trust. She repeated these mantras so often they became her absolute truth, her gospel. This new belief system dictated all her interactions. When a boy smiled at her in the school hallway, she met his warmth with a frown. When someone approached her with genuine interest, she'd roll her eyes in dismissal. If a classmate tried to start a friendly conversation, she would simply turn and walk away. She firmly believed she was protecting her heart, building an impenetrable defense. But in reality, she wasn't keeping others out. She was trapping herself in. Amarachi began to take immense pride in not needing anyone. Independence became her new identity. She poured all her energy into her studies, excelling in school not out of a love for learning, but out of a desperate need to prove to herself that she didn't need love, companionship, or friendship to succeed. She became fiercely independent, a lone wolf by choice. But with that independence came an extreme, crushing loneliness. She shared no secrets. She trusted no friends. She accepted no help, ever. Even on nights when the silence in her room was deafening and she desperately needed someone to talk to, she would put on a mask of indifference, pretending she was perfectly fine. To her classmates, she was a puzzle they couldn't solve. They gave her nicknames: that girl who minds her business, that girl who doesn't talk to anybody, that girl who always frowns. Amarachi heard the whispers, saw the curious glances, but she didn't care. Their opinions didn't matter. In her new world, nobody's did. The isolation was the price of her self-preservation, and for now, it was a price she was willing to pay. Sometimes, she would lie awake at night and think of Chike. Not because she still loved him, but because of what he represented: betrayal. Her mind would replay his laughter with Uju, her sister's calm, lying eyes, that one single moment behind the church hall. Instead of healing, she allowed the wound to grow roots deep inside her heart. She buried her trust. She buried her emotions. She buried her ability to believe in the kindness of others. By the time she finished secondary school, Amarachi was fully convinced of one thing: listening to people only leads to pain. From now on, I will follow only my own mind. And that single decision would follow her into university, where her stubbornness, a secret health issue, and her inability to connect would collide in ways she never, ever expected. The fortress she built around her heart would protect her from heartbreak, yes, but it would also block her from friendships, opportunities, and even love. Her journey of isolation had only just begun. By the time Amarachi entered university, the walls she had built inside her heart were as strong as steel. She walked onto campus not as a young girl searching for herself, but as a woman completely convinced she already knew who she was. She didn't want friends, she didn't want advice, and she definitely did not want anyone telling her how to live her life. But there was one thing, one silent, hidden problem that had followed her from childhood all the way into adulthood: the smell. This was a problem she pretended didn't exist. Ever since she was young, Amarachi had a strange, fishy smell coming from her private area, something she truly believed was normal for every woman. Whenever someone tried to draw her attention to hygiene, she would dismiss them quickly, even angrily. Her mother once said gently, "Amara, my daughter, come let me teach you something about womanhood." But Amarachi would just roll her eyes and say, "Mummy, please, I already know everything." Her aunt hinted about using a feminine wash, but Amarachi just replied, "It's not necessary." Her older cousin once pulled her aside. "Amara, you really need to check." But Amarachi snapped back, "I'm fine. I don't need your advice." So, everyone kept quiet. Everyone stepped back. No one bothered her again. She believed their silence meant they agreed with her. But their silence only meant they had given up trying to help. Amarachi entered her first year of university with supreme confidence. She arrived on campus dressed well, smelling of expensive body spray and perfume. On the surface, no one could tell anything was wrong. Her roommate at the time, a girl named Adiz, was friendly, cheerful, and had an open heart. She tried her best to befriend Amarachi, but Amarachi shut her down every single time. "Good morning, Amarachi," Adiz would greet with a smile. Amarachi would just grunt, "Are you going for class?" Adiz would ask, trying to make conversation. "If I want to, I will go," Amarachi would reply sharply. Soon, Adiz stopped trying. The friendly greetings became fewer and farther between. The attempts at conversation faded into silence. But the real issue, the one that couldn't be ignored, began whenever Amarachi undressed at night. When she removed her clothes and got into bed, the room would slowly, but surely, fill with a fishy, stale odor. Adiz noticed it instantly. She struggled to sleep, often covering her nose with her pillow, trying to discreetly spray air freshener, and opening the windows even on cold nights. At first, she thought it was something temporary. Maybe it was an infection that Amarachi would eventually treat. But day after day, week after week, the smell continued, growing stronger. And Amarachi, who rarely showered properly and refused to wash her underwear regularly, never seemed to notice. Or maybe she refused to. To her, this was her normal. This was just how things were. The quiet abandonment began subtly. By the second semester, Adiz simply couldn't endure it anymore. The constant smell was affecting her sleep, her studies, and her peace of mind. During the hostel allocation for the next session, She made sure not to choose Amarachi as her roommate. In fact, no one did. Word had quietly spread. Everyone wanted to avoid the girl with the sharp mouth and the even sharper smell. Amarachi noticed the distance. She saw how other girls paired up, making plans for the next year, leaving her out. But instead of asking why, instead of a moment of self-reflection, she told herself a different story. They are just jealous of me, she'd think. I don't need them anyway. Her pride wouldn't allow her to even consider that she might be the problem. Her stubbornness, the very same wall she built to protect herself, wouldn't let her accept that she might desperately need help. As she moved into her second year, Amarachi found herself in a room with 3 new girls. They were strangers, but the pattern repeated itself almost immediately. The initial polite greetings, the attempts at small talk, and then the inevitable retreat. The nights were the worst. The smell would permeate everything. The curtains, the bedsheets, the very air they breathed. Her new roommates started making excuses to stay out late. They'd study in the library until it closed, visit friends in other hostels, anything to avoid being in the room. One evening, one of the roommates, a bold girl named Neka, couldn't take it anymore. She approached Amarachi, not with malice, but with genuine concern. Amarachi, she began gently, I think you might need to see a doctor. There's a particular smell in the room, and we're worried it might be an infection. Amarachi's face turned to stone. All her old defenses went up. What smell? I don't smell anything, she lied, her voice dripping with ice. If you don't like the room, you are free to leave. Stop making up stories about me. Neka was stunned into silence. She had tried to be kind, but she was met with a wall of denial and aggression. After that, no one in the room spoke to Amarachi unless it was absolutely necessary. They communicated through whispers and side eyes. They coordinated their schedules to ensure someone was always out of the room. Amarachi was completely isolated within the 4 walls of her own room. She was an island, surrounded by a sea of silence she had created herself. This isolation extended beyond her room. In class, no one wanted to sit next to her. Despite her isolated lifestyle, some men admired Amarachi's beauty from afar. But every relationship was a fleeting dream, lasting only a few weeks. It always ended the same way. The moment she invited a man over, the moment things turned intimate, an invisible wall would rise, and the odor would chase him away permanently. The first guy, Keen, was polite. He slowly distanced himself, his texts becoming shorter, his calls less frequent. I'm just too busy, he'd say, a gentle excuse for a harsh reality. He never saw her again. The second guy, Sadiq, was more direct in his silence. After one night, he just stopped answering her calls. His number might as well have been disconnected. The third guy, Chima, was the most brutal. He left her room in the middle of the night, slipping out while she slept, and never spoke to her again. With each departure, Amarachi built a fortress around her heart. She told herself, they are all the same. All men are trash. But deep inside, beneath the anger and the pride, a small, quiet part of her wondered. Why? Why did everyone pull away the moment they got close? It was a question she was too afraid to answer. So, she refused to examine herself. She refused to visit a doctor. And she refused to listen when subtle hints were dropped. The problem, however, wasn't just chasing men away. It was becoming dangerous. At home, in the supposed safety of her own room, things took a disturbing turn. When she removed her underwear at night, the smell became so potent, so strong, that it started attracting unwanted attention. Rats, scurrying in the shadows of the house, began to gather under her bed. At first, she dismissed it. She thought it was just normal rodent behavior. But one night, she was jolted from her sleep. She felt something warm and wet on her inner thigh. Her eyes snapped open, and in the dim light, she saw it. A rat, licking near her vaginal area. A scream ripped from her throat. She kicked it away frantically, her heart pounding, and sprayed insecticide everywhere, a chemical cloud of denial. But the next night, another rat came. And another. They followed the scent like a breadcrumb trail, a gruesome pilgrimage. Instead of seeing this terrifying event as a sign, as a desperate cry for help from her own body, her anger flared. These useless rats, she seethed. They just want to stress me. She never once considered that the smell was the lure. She never believed the problem was deeper than just a nuisance. Her body was crying out for help, but she was deaf to its pleas. Her health was flashing warning signs, but she refused to look. Her relationships were collapsing one by one, but she blamed everyone else. Her life was slowly, tragically, shaping itself around a single, destructive truth. A refusal to accept correction can destroy a future. And soon, everything was about to reach a breaking point. Despite these social struggles, Amarachi excelled in one area: academics. Books never judged her. The pages of a textbook never corrected her attitude. Assignments never pointed out her flaws. She found comfort and refuge in studying because it was the one part of her life where she felt completely and utterly in control. While her classmates formed study groups, laughing and sharing notes, she studied alone in a quiet corner of the library. While they bonded over shared struggles and late-night cram sessions, she isolated herself, a lone ship in a bustling sea. While people laughed and chatted in the hallways, she would walk past, headphones on, music blasting, creating a barrier between her and the world. In a campus filled with thousands of students, Amarachi was an island, a world of one. By her second year, her reputation had solidified, whispered in hallways and common rooms. That girl is brilliant, but her attitude is something else. She doesn't like people, she's always frowning. Don't even try to talk to her, she's very rude. Some people avoided her because of her sharp, defensive words. Some avoided her because of the faint, unpleasant smell that sometimes clung to her. And some avoided her simply because she so clearly avoided them. But Amarachi, in her fortress of pride, interpreted their distance as jealousy. "They're just intimidated by my grades," she'd tell herself. "I don't need anybody." She repeated it like a mantra, a daily reminder to stay strong, to stay alone. Yet, deep inside, in the quiet moments late at night, she felt a subtle ache, a gnawing loneliness she refused to acknowledge. She buried it deep beneath layers of academic achievement and false confidence. Her professional growth started early. Amarachi was driven. She joined internships, volunteered for complex projects, and meticulously built an impressive CV long before graduation. Her supervisors were consistently impressed, praising her intelligence and unwavering dedication. "You're very focused, Amarachi," one of them said during a review. She nodded proudly, accepting the compliment as her due. If only they knew. If only they knew how empty her social life really was. If only they knew she wrestled with something so basic, so profoundly human. If only they knew she never let anyone get close enough for them to discover the truth she guarded so fiercely. She became an expert at hiding it. She used perfume as a shield, wore long, flowing skirts to trap the air, and perfected the art of minimal movement. At work or in public, as long as she kept her legs closed and avoided sweating, the odor stayed contained. It was her most guarded secret, a prisoner within her, and for a while, it remained hidden from the world. Her beauty was a magnet, drawing men in like moths to a flame. They'd approach, their confidence shining, completely captivated by her stunning looks, her sharp mind, and that fiery personality. But the moment intimacy entered the picture, everything changed. One night with Amarachi, and they were gone. Vanished, without a trace, never to return. At first, she brushed it off. "They're just not serious," she'd tell herself. But as the years ticked by, the pattern became undeniable, a cruel, repeating cycle. It always started with attraction, followed by genuine interest. Then came the romantic night, the one she hoped would be different. And finally, the sudden, silent disappearance. It was a script she knew by heart, yet Amarachi never once turned the spotlight on herself. "I'm not the problem," she'd insist, her voice firm. "They are." People tried to help, of course. They dropped subtle hints. Friends would gently suggest, "Maybe you should get a checkup?" A close friend who was a nurse even specifically advised her to see a gynecologist. Amarachi's reaction was always the same, a solid brick wall. "Leave me alone. There is nothing wrong with me." And just like that, the conversation was over. By the time she reached her final year of university, her world had shrunk. Amarachi had no close friends left. She didn't go to parties. She turned down every invitation for group outings. While her peers were making memories, laughing and living, her life was a straight, predictable line. School, room, school, room. Her old roommates kept their distance. Her course mates offered little more than a polite nod. And the few brave men who tried to get close, they became ghosts, just like all the others. She wore her loneliness like a badge of honor, a crown of self-sufficiency. "I don't need anybody," she'd declare to an empty room. "I'm fine on my own." But beneath the surface, a heavy sadness was taking root in her chest, a silent ache she refused to name. Her successes started to feel empty. Her achievements felt hollow, and the pride she clung to so tightly felt utterly exhausting. She was acing the game of life on paper, but in her heart, she was losing at everything that truly mattered. On graduation day, her parents were there, their faces beaming with pride. "Amarachi, first-class honors. We are so proud of you," she heard them exclaim. She smiled for the cameras, holding her certificate high, the perfect picture of a successful young woman. But no one could see the profound loneliness hiding behind her eyes. Her parents asked, "Where are your friends? Don't you want to take pictures with them?" "I don't need pictures with anyone," she replied, dismissing the question with a wave of her hand. Later that night, back in the quiet of her room, she sat alone on her bed, staring at the certificate in her hands. The crisp paper felt cold, and for the first time in a long time, she felt something unfamiliar. A tiny crack appeared in her armor of defiance. A small whisper echoed in the silence of her heart. It was a question she had buried for years. "Am I really okay?" But just as quickly as the thought surfaced, her stubbornness rose to silence it. She wasn't ready to face the truth. Not yet. She didn't know it then, but life was about to force her hand, and that moment was coming much sooner than she expected. After graduation, Amarachi charged into the professional world armed with everything she believed was important: a brilliant mind, fierce ambition, and an unstoppable drive to succeed. By the age of 24, she had landed a coveted job at a top company in Lagos, a position her former classmates were still dreaming of. At work, she was the epitome of excellence. Her colleagues admired her from a distance. "She's so hardworking," they'd say. "Incredibly intelligent. She always dresses so well." A truly focused woman. In the office, Amarachi was a fortress of composure. Always impeccably dressed, her presence announced by a cloud of expensive perfume. Her crisp professionalism was a perfect mask, hiding the secret that had shadowed her since she was a teenager. As long as she kept up the facade, stayed perfectly still, and maintained her flawless outward appearance, no one suspected a thing. But this carefully constructed world was fragile, and the cracks were beginning to show, threatening to bring everything crashing down around her. She poured all her energy into her career. Long hours, extra projects, she did it all. Work became her sanctuary, the one place where she felt in control, where her mysterious problem couldn't touch her. Her apartment was immaculate, a minimalist space that reflected her life. Orderly on the surface, but devoid of warmth or personal connection. She bought expensive things, dined at fancy restaurants alone, and traveled to beautiful places by herself. From the outside, her life on social media looked like a dream. Pictures of a confident, independent woman conquering the world. But the nights were the hardest. The silence of her expensive apartment would become deafening. The emptiness of the other side of her king-sized bed was a constant reminder of what she was missing. The loneliness she had once worn as a crown now felt like a lead weight. The sadness she couldn't name now had a voice, and it whispered her deepest fears in the dark. She started to realize that her success was a gilded cage. She had all the trappings of a happy life, but none of the substance. One evening, after a particularly grueling week at work, she scrolled through her phone. She saw photos of her old university coursemates at a wedding, another at a baby shower, pictures of friends laughing together, couples announcing their engagements. And in that moment, the weight of her isolation became unbearable. The professional accolades, the promotions, the salary, none of it could fill the gaping hole in her soul. A memory surfaced, unbidden. Her mother's gentle voice from years ago. "My child, no one is an island. We need people." She had scoffed at it then. Now, the words haunted her. She looked at her reflection in the dark screen of her phone. She saw a successful woman, a beautiful woman, and a profoundly lonely woman. The armor was finally beginning to crumble. For the first time, she didn't push the feeling away. She let the tears fall, a silent surrender in her perfect, empty apartment. The question returned, no longer a whisper, but a cry from deep within. "What is wrong with me?" This time, she knew she had to find the answer. Her journey to healing, whether she was ready for it or not, was about to begin. Just like she did in school, Amarachi kept her distance at work. When her colleagues invited her out for lunch, she'd politely decline. When they planned a weekend beach outing, she simply ignored the group chat. Whenever people tried to be friendly, she shut the door, always politely, but firmly. The truth was, she didn't trust anyone. She didn't want to get close to people, and she certainly didn't want them asking her questions. In her mind, she was self-sufficient. She didn't need friends. But the deeper truth was that she feared what friendship might reveal about her. She was terrified that if anyone got too close, they would discover the secret she was desperately trying to hide, even from herself. On the outside, her life looked perfect. Her career was taking off, and her salary increased with each promotion. She moved into a comfortable one-bedroom apartment in a nice part of town. She furnished it beautifully with soft, flowing curtains, a large, elegant mirror, and an array of scented candles. The floors were always spotless. Anyone who visited would admire her home. "Amara, you're doing so well for yourself," they'd say. "You're so organized," or "You are truly living the dream." She would just smile, gracefully accepting their praise. But what they didn't know was what happened at night, after the guests left and the doors were locked. What they couldn't see was the truth that emerged when she took off her work clothes, walked into her bathroom, and stood alone. That's when the smell would return. It was unmistakable, sharp, pungent, overwhelming. But Amarachi had mastered the art of denial. She refused to acknowledge it. "There's no problem," she would whisper to her reflection. "I'm clean. I'm healthy. This thing is normal." Her denial was a fortress, stronger than the undeniable truth that lingered in the air around her. Every night, after her shower, she would drop her underwear into the laundry basket in her room. But Amarachi was never the type to do laundry immediately. She'd let the clothes pile up for days, sometimes even for weeks. And as the pile grew, so did the odor, festering in the corner of her beautifully decorated room. She didn't notice it, or rather, she chose not to. After all, it had become her normal. But something else noticed. The apartment complex had a few rodents here and there, but they were never a nuisance. They mostly kept to the outer walls and the trash area, never bothering the residents. That is, until they discovered Amarachi's scent. It started subtly. First, there were faint scratching noises from under her bed at night. Then came soft, high-pitched squeaking in the darkness. Soon, she could hear the distinct pitter-patter of small paws scurrying across her spotless floor. At first, she assumed they were looking for food scraps. She was a meticulous cleaner, but she redoubled her efforts. She cleaned the entire apartment from top to bottom. She took out the trash every single day. She made sure not a single dirty dish was left in the sink. Yet, the rats kept returning. And strangely, they weren't going to her kitchen. They were coming to her bedroom. One night, as she slept soundly, she felt a slight movement near her thigh. Her eyes snapped open. In the dim light filtering through her window, she saw it. A rat, sniffing at her private area, its whiskers twitching as it licked her. It had been drawn by the very scent she refused to believe was abnormal. "Jesus!" she screamed, kicking out violently. The creature darted away into the shadows. But sleep was impossible now. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding in her chest, breathing hard. A wave of anger washed over her. "These rats want to stress my life?" she said aloud to the empty room. Never for a single moment did she consider that the rats weren't the problem. It never occurred to her that they were responding to something specific, a signal her own body was sending. Amarachi always told herself, men are wicked. She believed that men just use and dump you, that no man is ever serious. But not once did she look inward. Not once did she consider visiting a doctor or checking if something else might be wrong. Her stubbornness was stronger than any medicine. And so, by the age of 28, Amarachi had built a life that was completely solitary. She was successful, but deeply lonely. Beautiful, yet avoided by others. She was a grown woman, but emotionally stuck. Despite all this, she convinced herself she was living just fine. It would take her turning 30 and hearing some harsh truths from people she trusted, for those walls she built around herself to finally begin to crack. But for now, she remained exactly who she had always been, a woman who refused to listen, even when life itself was screaming at her to change. Time passed quickly, almost too quickly. Amarachi didn't really notice the years slipping by until she turned 30. Suddenly, conversations that once just annoyed her began to feel like a sharp sting. Questions like, "When will you marry?" or "You're getting older, you know?" and the classic, "Time waits for no one." Before, she would have snapped back confidently, "Marriage is not an achievement," or "I don't need a man to complete me." But now, when those same words came out of her mouth, they felt hollow, rehearsed, and just plain tired. She had spent more than a decade pushing everyone away. And now, at a time when she craved companionship, she found she had no one close enough to reach out to. The silence of her apartment became deafening. Most nights, Amarachi would sit on her bed after a long day at work, eating dinner alone, endlessly scrolling through her phone. She'd see her former classmates, their faces beaming with happiness. They were smiling with their partners, posting engagement pictures, celebrating anniversaries, and showing off their babies. There was a time when she would have just rolled her eyes and scrolled right past. But now, those images hurt. They stung in a way she couldn't ignore. She started muting her contacts, just to avoid seeing their happiness, a constant reminder of what she didn't have. She kept telling herself she didn't care, that she was fine. But loneliness has a way of echoing much louder in an empty room. Even her parents began to worry. Her mother once asked her gently, "Amara, my daughter, please talk to me. Is there someone?" Amarachi forced a smile and replied, "No, mummy." Her mother pressed on, "You're 30 now? Can we help you find someone?" "I'm not ready," she'd say. But the truth was, she was ready. In fact, she was more than ready. She was desperate. She just didn't know how to admit it, not even to herself. One night, after another man vanished without any explanation, Amarachi lay awake, just staring at the ceiling. For the first time in her life, she asked the question, "What is wrong with me?" Not with men, not with the world, not with relationships. With her. Tears slipped down her cheeks, slow, confused tears she hadn't cried since Chike betrayed her so many years ago. She held her pillow tight and whispered to the empty room, "Why does everyone leave me?" It was the beginning of self-awareness. The very first crack in the massive wall she had built around her heart. Amarachi had only two real friends, not close in the emotional sense, but familiar. They were women who had tolerated Amarachi's difficult attitude over the years because they saw the goodness buried beneath her stubbornness, her strictness, her denial, her sharp replies. They accepted her anyway. But when she turned 30, these two friends made a decision. They invited her over. "Amara, we need to talk," one said. "It's important," the other added. Amarachi frowned. She hated serious conversations. She hated being confronted. But for some strange reason, she went. She sat on the couch with her arms folded, already on the defensive. "What is it?" she snapped. The two women exchanged a look, a heavy, sad look. One of them spoke carefully. "Amara, we love you. We care about you." "Then say what you want to say," she replied impatiently. They both took a deep breath. "It's about your health. It's about something you've refused to see. It's about the smell." Amarachi froze. Her eyes widened. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, and heat rushed up her face. "What smell?" she asked sharply, her voice rising with every syllable. Her gentle friend swallowed hard. "The one from your body. Something is wrong, Amara. A very strong infection. We've noticed it for years, but you never let anyone get close enough to tell you." "We're not judging you," the other added quickly. "We just want to help you." Amarachi stared at them, completely speechless. For the first time in her life, she heard something she didn't want to hear. And for the first time in her life, she didn't walk away. The walls she'd spent a lifetime building finally began to fall. Her throat tightened, her vision blurred with tears. She whispered, "Are you serious?" "Yes," her friend said softly. "We want you to get better. We want you to have love and happiness. We want you to live the life you deserve." A tear rolled down Amarachi's cheek. Then another. Then more. Her friends moved closer and held her hand. And there, for the first time in her 30 years, Amarachi accepted correction. It was painful. It was humiliating. It was shocking. But it was the moment her life truly began to change. Amarachi woke up the next morning still shaken from the conversation. Her friend's words echoed in her head like a constant drumbeat. "There is something wrong. You need treatment. We want you to get better." This was more than just about a smell. It was about her entire life. It was about the men who left, the isolation she felt, the fortress she had built around herself. That painful, awkward conversation on the couch wasn't an attack. It was a lifeline. It was the key that could finally unlock the door to the life and the love she secretly craved. With trembling hands and a heart full of fear and a tiny spark of hope, she picked up her phone. She knew what she had to do next. It was time to face the truth, no matter how difficult it was. She stared at herself in the mirror, really looking for the first time in years. Her reflection didn't change. Her face was still beautiful, her skin smooth, her eyes bright. But behind that beauty, she saw something she had never admitted to herself: fear, loneliness, and a long, unfinished battle with denial. She finally understood. Her friends weren't mocking her. They weren't attacking her. They were trying to rescue her. Later that afternoon, Amarachi sat on her bed, phone in hand, scrolling through hospital numbers. Her chest tightened. She had never been to a gynecologist before, never discussed her private health with anyone, never allowed herself to believe anything could be wrong with her own body. Just dialing the number felt like admitting defeat. But then she remembered the men who ran away, the roommates who packed their bags and left without a word, the silent rejection she had endured for years, the crushing loneliness that shadowed every single part of her life. With trembling fingers, she finally dialed the number. A voice on the other end said, "Hello, this is Golden Care Hospital. How may we help you?" Her own voice cracked as she replied, I need an appointment for women's issues." The receptionist was warm and kind. "Of course, we can see you today." Amarachi's heart dropped. There was no going back now. When she entered the hospital, she felt small, very small. The cold air, the stark white walls, the nurses bustling around. Everything intimidated her. She filled out her forms quietly and sat in the waiting area, clutching her bag like it was a shield. She didn't talk to anyone. She didn't look up. She didn't breathe properly. This was the scariest moment of her life. Then, a nurse called her name. "Miss Amarachi Okafor." Her legs shook as she stood up and followed the nurse into the doctor's office. The gynecologist smiled gently. "Welcome, Amara. Please sit. How can I help you today?" Amarachi swallowed hard. I was told I should get myself checked." The doctor nodded patiently. "That's a very good step. What symptoms are you experiencing?" For the first time ever, she said the words out loud. "There's a smell. A bad one. It's been there for years." The doctor didn't laugh. She didn't judge. She didn't even look surprised. She simply started writing notes. "How long have you noticed it?" "Since I was young." "Any pain?" "Sometimes." "Any discharge?" "A little." The doctor nodded calmly. "Okay, we'll run a few tests to see what's going on." During the examination, Amarachi felt exposed, vulnerable, and absolutely terrified. Her heart raced with every question, every light, every medical tool. But the doctor remained gentle and professional throughout the entire process. When the tests were done, she sat Amarachi down again. Her expression was serious, but kind. "Amara, the odor is not normal. It seems you've had a long, untreated infection." Amarachi's breath caught in her throat. "Infection? Yes," the doctor continued. "A chronic bacterial issue. One that has persisted for years simply because it was never treated. But the good news is..." She paused. "It is treatable. Completely treatable." Amarachi's eyes filled with tears. "You mean this whole time?" "Yes. This was never your fault. You just needed to treat it. And now we will." The room started to blur. Her vision swam with tears. Relief mixed with shame, shock, and a deep grief for the lost years. How much suffering could she have avoided? How many friendships, relationships, opportunities? How much confidence had she lost? All because she was too afraid to listen to her body and seek help. The doctor prescribed medication, strong antibiotics, specific hygiene instructions, and a series of follow-up checkups. "Stay consistent with the treatment," she told her. "Your body will respond." Amarachi just nodded quietly. As she left the hospital, she felt lighter, not because of the medicine, but because a heavy, invisible weight had finally been lifted from her shoulders. This story is a powerful reminder that we should never be ashamed to seek help for our health. Your body is not your enemy, and doctors are there to help, not to judge. For the first time in 30 years, she accepted help. She accepted truth. She accepted correction. She walked out of that hospital with a bag full of medication, but more importantly, a heart full of something she hadn't felt in a very long time: hope. Everything was about to change: her body, her mindset, her future. And life had one more gift waiting for her: love. But that would come only after she learned to finally listen to others, to her body, and to her heart. After leaving the hospital that day, Amarachi felt a strange combination of relief, shame, and disbelief. Relief because someone had finally confirmed what her friends had been telling her for years. Shame because she realized just how long she had ignored her body. And disbelief because for 30 years, she had convinced herself she was fine, and now the undeniable truth was staring her right in the face. She returned home with the medications, sitting quietly on her pristine bed. Her apartment was spotless. Everything was always perfectly in its place, except her mind, which felt like a raging storm. The first steps weren't easy. Amarachi opened the prescription bag and read the instructions carefully. Antibiotics, probiotics, special hygiene products, and a schedule for follow-up appointments. For the first time in years, she followed instructions without argument. She took her pills on time. She cleaned herself exactly as directed. She washed her undergarments properly and consistently. The habits of a lifetime were hard to change, but she felt a new sense of determination. Every single day, she reminded herself, I am doing this for me. I deserve health. I deserve happiness. And slowly, day by day, she began to feel a difference. The physical discomfort and the odor that had haunted her for so long started to fade. Her body felt lighter, cleaner, and freer than it had in decades. While her body was healing, her mind began a different kind of work, one that was harder, more painful, and ultimately transformative. She started to reflect on her life, on the stubbornness that had controlled her for so long. She thought about the friends she had lost, the men who had left her, the opportunities she had missed, and the deep loneliness she had endured. She finally admitted it to herself in the quiet of her apartment. This is my fault, not theirs. For the first time, Amarachi allowed herself to feel guilt without anger, shame without despair, and regret without self-loathing. It was a delicate balance, but it was the true start of her growth. The friends who had staged the intervention continued to support her. They called often, checking in to see if she had taken her medicine. They encouraged her to keep her appointments with the doctor. And Amarachi listened. She didn't argue. She didn't make excuses. Every time she followed their advice, she felt a sense of empowerment she had never known before. I am finally learning how to listen, she whispered to her reflection one night. I am finally learning how to trust. It wasn't just about medicine or hygiene. It was about humility. It was about accepting correction. It was about breaking down the thick wall she had built around her heart for 15 long years. As the weeks passed, Amarachi began to notice subtle but profound changes. Her energy returned. Her body felt fresh and healthy. Her mind felt sharper, lighter, and more free. Her reflection in the mirror no longer brought a wave of shame. For the first time in decades, she felt like she could be fully herself, without hiding, without fear, and without making excuses. She started to interact with people differently. She smiled more. She laughed more. She allowed herself to enjoy conversations without feeling defensive. Her friends noticed it immediately. Amara, you seem different, one of them said. Happier. She smiled a genuine, radiant smile. I am, she admitted. I feel alive in a way I never have before. Amarachi's story reminds us that it's never too late to heal, to listen, and to choose a new beginning. With her body and mind healed, something unexpected began to stir within Amarachi, a quiet openness to others. She no longer believed that all men were the same. She no longer feared betrayal before giving someone a chance. And she no longer assumed that advice from her loved ones was a criticism. For the first time, Amarachi was truly ready to let someone close. And fate, as it so often does, had already prepared a man who would appreciate her newly transformed self. But before love could fully enter her life, Amarachi had to continue building trust in herself. She had to continue listening, continue accepting guidance, and continue embracing change. And for the first time in 30 years, she was ready to try. A few months after her treatment began, Amarachi felt a new kind of freedom. Her body was healing, her mind was opening, and her heart, for the first time in years, felt like it might be able to trust again. It was during this period that fate decided to introduce Chitty. Amarachi's best friend, Nina, knew Amarachi's journey had just begun. She's healed her body, Nina said one evening. But her heart needs someone gentle to trust. One Saturday afternoon, Nina invited Amarachi to a small gathering of close friends. Amarachi almost declined. She wasn't used to socializing, and the old habit of isolation was strong. But this time, she paused, took a deep breath, and said yes. When she arrived, Chitty was there. He was tall, with a calm and observant presence. He had a kind smile and eyes that seemed to look past the walls she had spent years building around herself. He didn't try to impress her. He didn't rush in with flattery or loud jokes. He simply existed, steady, patient, and unassuming. Nina made the introduction. "Amara, this is Chitty," she said with a warm smile. Chitty nodded politely. "It's nice to meet you, Amarachi." Amarachi returned the nod cautiously. "Chitty," she said simply, keeping her tone neutral, a practiced defense mechanism. They found themselves sitting at a small table, observing the lively conversation flowing around them. For a while, Amarachi spoke little, and Chitty said little in return. But when he did speak, his words were gentle, thoughtful, and unhurried. He didn't try to dominate the conversation or fill every silence. He didn't push her for answers or make assumptions about her. He just listened. And as he spoke about simple things, a book he was reading, a recent walk in the park, Amarachi found herself listening. Really listening. For the first time in decades, she didn't feel the need to argue, to defend her position, or to prove her intelligence. She just listened, and it felt peaceful. This initial, quiet meeting blossomed into a subtle connection. Over the next few weeks, they began to meet casually, for coffee, for walks in the park, for shared lectures on topics they both enjoyed. Each meeting was low pressure, a gentle exploration. Amarachi started to notice something unfamiliar, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. She felt calm around him. She felt safe. She felt like she could speak her mind without fear of judgment or ridicule. The constant tension in her shoulders seemed to relax whenever he was near. Chitty noticed things too. He saw the way she would open up slightly, sharing a small thought or a memory, and then just as quickly retreat, as if catching herself being too vulnerable. He saw the walls around her heart, but instead of trying to break them down forcefully, he chose to respect them. He understood that these walls were built for a reason, and he was patient enough to let her lower them on her own terms. "You don't have to tell me everything at once," he said softly during one of their walks. "I'll wait." Those 4 words, "I'll wait," touched Amarachi in a way she couldn't explain. Nobody had ever offered her patience instead of pressure. Nobody had ever offered her trust instead of criticism. It was a promise of safety, an acknowledgement of her past without needing to know the details. In the weeks that followed, Amarachi began to notice profound changes in herself. She laughed more freely, the sound no longer feeling foreign. She started sharing small secrets with her friends, rebuilding the bonds that her pain had frayed. She learned to listen without immediately arguing, to consider other perspectives without feeling attacked. She even found the strength to admit when she didn't know something, replacing her old need to be right with a new curiosity to learn. Chitty's presence became a mirror for her growth. He didn't demand perfection from her. He never brought up her past struggles unless she chose to share them. He simply offered consistent respect, unwavering patience, and genuine kindness. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the walls she had built for 15 years began to soften. They didn't crumble overnight. They were still there, a testament to her journey and a source of her strength. But they were no longer a prison. They were becoming more like a garden fence, with a gate she was finally learning to open. The hard, impenetrable stone was softening into something more like a hedge, allowing light and warmth to pass through. It was enough for her to believe in the possibility of love again, not as a fairy tale or a rescue, but as a partnership built on mutual respect and gentle understanding. For the first time, love didn't feel like a threat, it felt like a possibility. A quiet, hopeful, and beautiful possibility. And with Chitty by her side, she was finally ready to see where it would lead. One rainy evening, as Amarachi and Chitty walked along the quiet streets after a study session, something shifted. The air was cool, the city lights blurred by the drizzle. Amarachi held her folded umbrella, hesitating, letting the rain soak her hair and shoulders. It was a small, almost imperceptible act of rebellion against her own caution. Chitty noticed, but he didn't say anything. He didn't rush to cover her or ask why she wasn't using her umbrella. Instead, he just walked beside her, matching her pace, a silent companion in the gentle downpour. After a few moments of shared silence, he spoke, his voice soft but clear over the patter of the rain. "You don't have to hide from the rain," he said. "I'll walk with you." The simplicity of his words struck her with an unexpected force. There was no hidden meaning, no game, no judgment. It was just kindness, pure and simple. It wasn't an offer to fix her or to protect her, but to share the moment with her, just as she was. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Amarachi felt a small crack in the walls she had built around her heart. She felt ready to let someone in. Carefully, slowly, but with a flicker of hope she hadn't felt in years. By the end of that evening, a profound realization had settled within her. She could trust someone again. She could allow herself to care for another person without the paralyzing fear of betrayal. She could open her heart without the risk of losing herself in the process. Chitty wasn't trying to change her. He didn't challenge her stubbornness or try to dissect her past. He simply met her where she was, offering his presence and his patience, waiting for her to find her own way forward. And Amarachi, for the first time in so long, began to accept that maybe, just maybe, love could be gentle. It could be patient. It could be healing. Her life had begun a new chapter, one where she was no longer trapped by her own stubbornness, fear, or shame. This was a chapter where healing wasn't just about her physical health. It was emotional, it was spiritual, and it felt real. The weeks that followed turned into months, and Amarachi started noticing the subtle, yet profound, ways her life was transforming. It was a change she had never imagined possible. Her body was healing, the persistent health issues finally receding under her diligent care. Her mind felt clearer, less cluttered with the anxieties and resentments that had clouded it for so long. And her heart, once locked away behind layers of fear and defiance, was beginning to soften. At the very center of this transformation was Chitty. Their relationship wasn't a whirlwind romance. There were no grand, dramatic declarations of love, no rushed promises of forever, no instant, all-consuming commitments. Instead, it was steady. It was patient. It was quiet. It was built on a foundation of small, consistent acts of kindness. Chitty would call her, not with any grand agenda, but simply to ask how her day went. He would listen, truly listen, when she spoke, even when she rambled about trivial things or complained about a long day. He never judged her. He never pressured her to be someone she wasn't. He never made her feel like a project to be fixed. Amarachi began to understand that this was what healthy love could feel like. It wasn't about possession or control. It was about support. It was gentle. It was enduring. This newfound sense of safety gave her the courage to open up about her past. She told him everything. She spoke of the deep betrayal by her sister, a wound that had festered for years. She confessed her own stubborn refusal to listen to those who tried to help her, the pride that led her into isolation. She even shared the details of her long-standing health issue, the very thing that had been a source of so much shame and secrecy. Throughout it all, Chitty listened with an unwavering attentiveness. Not once did his expression change. Not once did he look at her differently or make her feel small for her past mistakes or vulnerabilities. For the first time, Amarachi felt truly, completely understood. She wasn't just being heard. She was being seen for who she was, past and present, and she was being accepted. Her friends, of course, remained a constant pillar of support. Nina, ever the practical and caring friend, checked in regularly. One evening, Amarachi invited Chitty to her apartment. The city hummed softly outside her window, a quiet backdrop to a night that felt different. She had cleaned meticulously, as she always did, but this time, there was no anxiety, no knot of worry in her stomach. She wasn't concerned about judgment. When Chitty walked in, a warm smile spread across his face. He looked at her and said, "You look happy." Amarachi paused, the word hanging in the air. "Happy," she repeated, a small, genuine laugh escaping her lips. It was a foreign concept, but as she considered it, she realized it fit. "Yes," Chitty said gently, his gaze kind. "You seem at peace." And in that moment, she knew he was right. It was a feeling she'd never truly known. Not after the stressful days of school, not during her lonely years navigating adulthood, and certainly not after the series of heartbreaks that had left her guarded. This was new. This was real. They began dating officially, and Amarachi quickly noticed how different this relationship felt. It wasn't a whirlwind of high-stakes emotions or a battle of wills. It was calm. It was respectful. Chitty honored her boundaries without question. He encouraged her growth, celebrating her small victories and supporting her ambitions. He never demanded perfection, which was a revelation for someone who had spent her life trying to be flawless. With him, she found herself laughing more freely, a deep, uninhibited joy bubbling up from within. She shared her thoughts more openly, her fears and dreams no longer locked away. She even started allowing herself to ask for help, a vulnerability she had long seen as a weakness. Chitty, in turn, was captivated by her. He admired her fierce determination, the sharp intellect that shone through in their conversations, and the quiet courage it took for her to face each day. He saw the strength beneath her polished exterior, and slowly, brick by brick, the walls she had spent years building began to crumble. They weren't torn down by force. No one was demanding entry. Instead, she found herself choosing to open the gate, to let someone in, to let them go. This newfound peace led Amarachi to reflect on the long, winding road that had brought her here. She thought about the sting of her sister's betrayal, the profound loneliness she'd felt at university, and the string of men who had left her feeling inadequate. She confronted her own stubborn refusal to listen, to accept help, and to face the health problem that had plagued her for years. She realized that while her past had shaped her, it no longer had the power to define her. For the first time, she could see the entire tapestry of her life. Her mistakes, her stubbornness, and even her suffering were not just scars. They were threads that had woven her into the person she was today, strong, healthy, and finally capable of loving again. As her relationship with Chitty grew, Amarachi started to imagine a future she had never dared to dream of. The picture in her mind was no longer blurry with fear and uncertainty. She could see herself with a partner who truly valued her, not for what she could do for him, but for who she was. She could imagine love without the constant fear of abandonment. She could even envision a family, something she had long ago dismissed as an impossible dream. She knew this was all possible because she had finally learned to listen. She listened to her friends when they offered advice. She listened to her body when it signaled it needed rest and care. Most importantly, she listened to the truth she had been avoiding for so many years. One evening, as Chitty held her hand, a quiet smile played on her lips. "I never thought I could feel this way," she whispered, her voice filled with a quiet wonder. "But I'm ready, truly ready." In that moment, Amarachi knew the journey was complete. The long, hard path of stubbornness, betrayal, and denial had finally led her to this beautiful destination, a place of trust, love, and unwavering hope. Her life had changed. Her heart had changed. And for the first time, Amarachi felt she could embrace whatever the future held, with open arms and an open heart. By the time they had been dating for several months, their bond had deepened into something more than just companionship. It was a true partnership, rooted in mutual respect, endless patience, and a profound understanding of one another. Amarachi felt herself evolving in ways she never thought possible. Her stubbornness, once a defensive weapon she wielded against the world, had transformed. It was now a quiet strength, tempered with humility and grace. Her self-awareness had blossomed. She no longer blamed others for her past misfortunes, but took ownership of her own journey. Her body was healthy, her mind was alert, and her heart was wide open. This internal transformation radiated outward, changing her daily life in subtle but significant ways. Her apartment, once just a sterile showcase of cleanliness and style, now felt like a home. It was still immaculate, but the energy was different. She maintained her disciplined hygiene not out of fear, but out of self-respect. Her schedule was no longer just a rigid to-do list. It was thoughtfully organized to include nourishing meals, regular exercise, and essential mental health breaks. She connected with her friends and colleagues on a deeper, more meaningful level. Even the small gestures mattered more. She lit scented candles to create a calming atmosphere, kept the floors spotless as an act of self-care, and took time for quiet self-reflection. Chitty noticed every little change. He saw the light in her eyes, the ease in her posture, and the warmth in her smile. One evening, as they cooked dinner together, the kitchen filled with the aroma of spices and easy laughter, he turned to her. "You've changed, Amarachi," he said, his voice soft with admiration. "I like this you." As Amarachi learned to trust Chitty, she noticed a profound shift in her life. The fear of intimacy that had once held her captive began to loosen its grip. She found herself opening up, sharing her past without the heavy cloak of shame she used to wear. When Chitty offered advice, she no longer felt a surge of resentment. Instead, she listened, truly listened, and considered his perspective. One sunny afternoon, they went shopping. Chitty, with his gentle way, picked out an outfit for her. It was a color she'd never dare to wear, something completely outside her comfort zone. The old Amarachi would have snapped, rejected it instantly. But this new Amarachi, the one who was learning to trust, simply took it and went to the fitting room. As she looked at her reflection, a genuine smile spread across her face. She loved it. That simple moment felt like a turning point, a symbol of her newfound willingness to be influenced, to be guided, and, most importantly, to be loved. Her transformation didn't go unnoticed. Amarachi started attending social gatherings, not as a wallflower, but as an active participant. She laughed freely, her joy infectious. She shared stories, engaged in conversations without the old defensiveness or judgment clouding her interactions. It was like a light had been switched on inside her. Colleagues would whisper, "Amarachi looks radiant." Friends would comment, "Something about her energy has completely shifted." Even distant relatives remarked, "She seems so happy." This wasn't just about shedding her old struggles. It was about embracing something new. It was the presence of a deep, quiet confidence, one built not on arrogance, but on humility, self-care, and the emotional intelligence she had worked so hard to cultivate. The walls she had painstakingly built around her heart were finally coming down, brick by brick. As the months turned into a year, Amarachi and Chitty's conversations deepened. They moved beyond surface-level chats and into the heart of what mattered. They talked about their family values, their hopes and dreams for the future, their biggest ambitions. They started to weave their lives together, imagining a home, a shared space where their individual stories could become a single, beautiful narrative. Amarachi realized that love didn't have to be the scary, transactional, fear-driven game she had always believed it to be. It could be a safe harbor, a partnership of equals founded on patience, deep understanding, and unwavering trust. One warm evening, as they sat on her balcony, watching the city lights flicker below, Amarachi turned to Chitty, her voice soft but steady. "I never thought I'd be here," she confessed. "I never thought I'd trust someone this completely. But I do. With you." Chitty's smile was all the reassurance she needed. He took her hand and said, "And I promise I'll never give you a reason to doubt it." Those weren't just empty words to Amarachi. They were an affirmation, a confirmation of the long, arduous journey she had finally completed. She had traveled from a place of stubborn isolation to a new world of trust, self-awareness, and profound love. Amarachi knew she would never forget her past. The betrayal, the loneliness, the long, frustrating years of denial, they were all part of her story. But they no longer defined her. She had learned powerful lessons along the way. She learned that listening is a sign of strength, not weakness. She learned that accepting feedback and correction can radically change the course of your life. And she discovered that patience and self-care are not luxuries, but essential tools for healing and growth. With Chitty by her side, she came to an even more profound realization. The world wasn't a terrifying place to be controlled or feared. It was a world to be engaged with, openly, with a heart full of love and trust. She looked at him, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the evening sky, and a sense of peace washed over her. Her life had changed. Her heart had healed. Her future, and the incredible love she now embraced, was finally hers to shape. By the time Amarachi turned 31, her relationship with Chitty had blossomed from a gentle companionship into a deep, unshakable bond. It was far more than just attraction or the fleeting excitement of a new romance. It was built on a solid foundation of mutual respect, trust, understanding, and a shared commitment to growth, both as individuals and as a couple. One morning, she caught her reflection in the mirror and was struck by how far she had come. Gone was the stubborn, defensive woman who lived in isolation. Gone were the nights filled with silent tears and the gnawing loneliness that had once been her constant companion. In her place stood a healthy, confident woman, ready and eager to embrace a future that had once seemed completely out of reach. Everything changed one beautiful weekend. After a lovely dinner, Amarachi and Chitty were sitting on her balcony, enjoying the peaceful hum of the city and the twinkling lights below. The atmosphere was calm, comfortable, familiar. Chitty turned to her, his expression serious yet incredibly gentle. Amara, he began softly, his voice full of warmth. I've been thinking a lot about us, about our future. And I want you to know something. Amarachi's heart did a little flip, a mix of anticipation and nervousness, though she tried to remain composed. He reached for her hand, his touch grounding her. I want to marry you, he said, his eyes locked on hers. I don't want to rush you, but I honestly can't imagine my life without you in it. Amarachi just blinked, momentarily stunned into silence. A tidal wave of emotions washed over her, disbelief, overwhelming joy, and a profound sense of gratitude. She thought about how different this moment was from any proposal she had ever daydreamed about in her past. There was no pressure, no ultimatum, no hidden agenda driven by fear. There was only pure, honest love and deep respect, the very thing she had spent years learning how to accept and, more importantly, how to give herself. This wasn't an ending. It was a beautiful, new beginning. Tears welled up in Amarachi's eyes. She whispered, I want that too. Chitty was everything she had ever hoped for, but the past felt like a heavy anchor. But you know my past. You know my stubbornness, my mistakes, everything. Chitty just smiled, his grip on her hand warm and firm. I know, he said gently, and I love all of it, because it made you who you are today. In that moment, something shifted inside Amarachi. A belief she had struggled with for years finally clicked into place. For the first time, she truly believed it. Her past did not define her. Her mistakes, her stubbornness, even the long, lonely years of isolation, they hadn't broken her. They had shaped her into someone capable of love, of trust, of growth. And now, standing here with Chitty, she felt ready to take the next step. Over the next few months, their conversations deepened. They began to plan their shared future, not with hypotheticals, but with earnest intention. Where would they live? How would they manage their finances? What kind of family did they see for themselves? Amarachi couldn't help but notice how different these conversations were from the ones she had before, with men who were never meant to stay. With Chitty, there was no judgment. There was no fear of saying the wrong thing. There was no pressure to be someone she wasn't. There was only understanding, compromise, and a shared vision for their life together. It wasn't just the big talks. It was the small, everyday moments too. Amarachi continued her health routine with the same diligence, but it was no longer a solo journey. Chitty became her biggest supporter. He'd remind her to take her supplements, celebrate her small victories, and champion her self-care. It was a shared path, and walking it together made all the difference. With Chitty's support, Amarachi found the courage to embrace complete vulnerability. She started sharing the insecurities she had once kept locked away. Her long-standing health struggles, her deep-seated fear of rejection, the quiet ache of loneliness that had been her companion for years. And every single time she opened up, Chitty met her with unwavering patience and reassurance. You are enough, he would tell her, his voice steady and true. You are deserving of love, and I choose to be here with you, no matter what. Through this, Amarachi discovered a new kind of strength. It wasn't the brittle strength of walls or the false power of stubbornness. It was a strength that came from the courage to be fully seen, flaws and all. By the end of the year, Amarachi felt a profound sense of readiness. She had learned lessons that would guide her for the rest of her life. She learned that listening is a form of strength, not weakness. That accepting correction can quite literally save your life. That humility and self-care are two of the most powerful tools you can possess. And most importantly, that trust, patience, and understanding are the true foundations of lasting love. With Chitty, she could finally imagine a future filled with joy, partnership, and mutual respect. So when he asked her to begin planning their engagement, her heart didn't flutter with anxiety. It overflowed with gratitude. For the first time in her life, she truly believed the words as she thought them. I am ready for forever. I am ready to love fully. I am ready to live the life I have always deserved. Her long and winding journey of stubbornness, denial, and isolation hadn't been a detour. It had been the path that led her right here, to a place of love, hope, and infinite possibility. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that this was only the beginning. The day of their engagement was one Amarachi would never forget. It wasn't just a party or a promise. It was a celebration of growth, a testament to healing and a monument to resilience. She woke that morning with a mix of excitement and quiet nostalgia. Looking at her reflection in the mirror, she saw a woman transformed. Gone was the stubborn, isolated young woman who had feared love, ignored advice, and suffered in silence. In her place stood Amarachi reborn, confident, self-aware, and finally, truly at peace with her past. She was ready to embrace life in all its fullness. The ceremony itself was intimate and beautiful, filled with the close family and a few dear friends who had been her pillars of support. Her mother, her eyes shining, cried quiet tears of joy as she adjusted Amarachi's outfit. Her father's gaze was filled with a pride that needed no words. And at the altar, Chidi waited, his eyes warm and steady, a perfect reflection of the love and respect they had so carefully built together. As Chidi took her hand, he leaned in and whispered, "You are everything I ever dreamed of, Amarachi, and I will love you through every joy and every challenge." Fresh tears filled her eyes, but this time they were tears of pure happiness. She squeezed his hand tightly, realizing that the promise they were making was so much more than a ritual. It was the culmination of years of self-discovery, growth, and profound healing. Throughout the ceremony, Amarachi found moments to reflect. Her mind drifted back to the heartbreak of her teenage years, the sting of betrayal from her own sister, and the isolating pain that followed. She remembered stubbornly ignoring advice, pushing people away, and refusing to see the truth about her own health. She remembered the nights of silent tears, the loneliness that had shadowed her into adulthood. And yet, she also remembered the moments that changed everything. She remembered finally opening up to Chidi. She remembered the courage it took to seek help for her health. She remembered the strength she found in vulnerability and the peace that came with self-acceptance. This journey wasn't about Chidi saving her. It was about Amarachi saving herself, with Chidi walking beside her as a loving partner. He didn't fix her. He created a safe space where she could finally heal herself. As she stood there, holding Chidi's hand, she knew this was the future she had earned. A future built not on fantasy, but on the hard work of self-improvement. Their love story wasn't a fairy tale. It was a real-life testament to the power of growth. The night her friends confronted her with love and truth. The day she visited the doctor and began healing her body. The first time she allowed herself to trust someone fully, Chidi. Each memory reminded her that every hardship had led her here, to a place of love, acceptance, and hope. It was a journey marked by pain, but defined by growth. And now, she was standing at a beautiful milestone, surrounded by the people who had never given up on her. Her family gave their blessings with joy and relief. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering, "Amara, you've grown so much. I'm proud of the woman you've become." Her father, his eyes shining with pride, added, "You've learned to listen, to trust, and to love. That is more important than anything else." In that moment, Amarachi realized how much she had longed for this, not just for herself, but for the people who had cared for her through all her struggles. Their approval was a warm, healing balm on old wounds. The engagement ring Chidi placed on her finger wasn't just a symbol of love. It was a symbol of her profound transformation. It was a sparkling reminder that she could embrace correction and guidance without feeling attacked. It was a sign that she could trust again, that her heart was no longer locked away. Most importantly, it was proof that she could be vulnerable without fear, that she could let someone in completely. For the first time in her life, Amarachi didn't just feel beautiful on the outside. She felt whole, healed, and truly complete, inside and out. As the engagement ceremony ended and the guests began to leave, a quiet calm settled over them. Amarachi and Chidi stood together, holding hands, wrapped in the peaceful glow of the evening. "I never thought I'd feel this peace," Amarachi whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Not after everything I've been through." Chidi smiled and gently kissed her forehead. "You've earned every moment of happiness, Amarachi. You've worked so hard to grow, and now we get to build a life together." She nodded, smiling through happy tears. "I'm ready for forever." The journey from stubbornness, denial, and isolation to trust, self-care, and love had reached a beautiful new beginning. And with Chidi by her side, Amarachi knew that the best was still yet to come. After their engagement, Amarachi's life took on a new rhythm, one filled with anticipation, joy, and a deep sense of fulfillment. The heavy burdens of past mistakes, stubbornness, and isolation were finally lifted. She had grown in ways she never imagined possible, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Now, she was preparing to step into a brand new chapter with Chitty, the man who had patiently walked beside her through every single step of her transformation, never once faltering in his belief in her. Amarachi and Chitty decided to plan their wedding slowly, deliberately, and thoughtfully. They wanted every part of it to reflect their journey and their love. They chose a date together, carefully balancing work schedules and family availability. They visited venues, their faces lit with excitement as they imagined their closest friends and family witnessing their union. They spent evenings discussing guest lists, food, decorations, and all the small, personal details that would make the day uniquely theirs. Through it all, Amarachi noticed how different she felt from the woman she once was. She could now make decisions without being paralyzed by fear. She could accept advice and ideas from loved ones without getting defensive or starting an argument. She could imagine sharing her life fully with someone without hesitation. Each step of the planning process reinforced her growth and her newfound confidence. Her friends, the very ones who had staged that difficult intervention, were now her most enthusiastic supporters. Look at you, Amarachi. From a stubborn, isolated girl to a beautiful bride-to-be, Nina said with a wide, joyful grin during one of their meetups. Amarachi laughed, a genuine, light-hearted sound, as she remembered the years of denial and hardship. I couldn't have done it without all of you, she admitted sincerely, her heart full of gratitude. Her family was just as overjoyed. Her mother helped her pick out her bridal outfit, whispering, "You've grown into such a wise, beautiful woman." Her father nodded proudly, adding, "You've learned lessons most people take a lifetime to learn." Amarachi realized with deep clarity that the people who loved her had been the essential anchors and guides helping her reach this incredible moment. Late one evening, Amarachi sat quietly in her bedroom, the soft glow of her laptop screen illuminating her face as she went over wedding plans. She paused, her fingers still on the keyboard, and let her mind drift back through her journey. The heartbreak of her teenage years that first built the walls around her heart, the sharp sting of betrayal by her sister, and the profound loneliness that followed. She remembered her stubborn refusal to listen, the years of self-imposed isolation, and the toll it all took on her. The health struggles she had endured silently, too proud to ask for help. But then, her thoughts turned to the light. The transformative power of finally listening, of daring to trust, and of accepting guidance from those who cared. Tears filled her eyes, not of sadness, but of profound gratitude and relief. She whispered to herself, "I've grown. I've changed. And now, I'm ready to live the life I was always meant to live." It was a promise to herself, a declaration of a future she had fought so hard to claim. Planning our wedding was where I truly saw our partnership shine. Chitty and I made every decision as equals. We respected each other's opinions, and oh, the laughter. We'd spend hours joking, dreaming about our future home, our family, and the life we were about to build together. Slowly, I started to notice something incredible happening within me. Those old fears that had clung to me for so long. The fear of rejection, of intimacy, of making a mistake. They were just fading away. I realized I could fully trust Chitty. But even more importantly, I could finally, fully trust myself. I was ready to embrace the life we were creating without hesitation. Every single day, I wake up with this overwhelming sense of gratitude. It's a feeling that fills my entire being. I'm grateful for my health, which is now fully restored after such a long battle. I'm so grateful for my friends, my rocks, who guided me through the darkest times. And of course, I'm grateful for Chitty, who loved me with a patience and completeness I never thought possible. But most of all, I'm grateful for myself, for finally finding the courage to embrace change and to grow. The heavy cloak of shame and fear I used to wear is gone. I no longer judge myself with such a harsh inner critic. I no longer doubt whether I deserve happiness. Instead, there's this incredible lightness, a joy that isn't rooted in being perfect, but in being resilient. It's a joy born from growth and from love. As our wedding day got closer and closer, I felt a calm readiness settle over me. I was prepared to step into the next chapter of my life. My journey had been long, and it had been incredibly challenging, but every single step, every tear, every moment of struggle had brought me to this exact place. It had forged me into a woman who had learned to listen, not just to others, but to her own heart. A woman who had learned to trust, not just her partner, but her own instincts. I was a woman who had healed, grown, and finally learned how to embrace love fully, without holding back. And with Chitty by my side, I knew, deep in my soul, that this wasn't the end of a journey. It was just the beginning. I whispered to myself, the past made me who I am, but the future is ours to create. My heart was full, my spirit was strong, and my life, which was once so shadowed by stubbornness, denial, and isolation, was now completely illuminated with hope, love, and endless possibility. The day of our wedding arrived like something out of a dream. The sun shone so warmly over Lagos, and you could feel the city humming with life, almost as if it were celebrating right along with us. The venue was breathtaking, decorated with flowers and soft, delicate colors that seemed to float in the air. A gentle melody drifted through the space, carrying with it the sounds of laughter and the pure joy of our friends and family who had gathered to share this moment. I took one last look at myself in the mirror before it was time to walk down the aisle. The woman staring back at me was transformed. She was confident, radiant, and completely at peace. Gone were the years of stubbornness that had kept me stuck. Gone was the denial that had blinded me. Gone was the loneliness that had been my constant companion. And gone were all the fears that had once cast such a long shadow over my life. In that moment, I knew I was ready. Ready to embrace love, ready to embrace family, and ready to embrace a future that I had once believed was completely impossible for me. Walking down the aisle, my heart was pounding, but it was a drumbeat of anticipation, not fear. At the end of that path stood Chitty, his eyes shining with so much love and pride that it took my breath away. When our hands finally met at the altar, it was more than just a physical touch. It was a connection that represented years of growth, of patience, and of a trust that had been built piece by piece. The vows we exchanged were a reflection of everything we had been through and everything we hoped to be. Chitty spoke softly, his voice full of emotion. I promise to love you through every joy and every challenge. He looked into my eyes and continued. I promise to walk beside you with patience, respect, and understanding. When it was my turn, my voice was steady and strong, filled with a certainty I had never felt before. I promise to listen, I said, to trust, and to grow with you. I promise to honor the love that has healed me and led me here. In that sacred moment, tears glistened in the eyes of so many of our guests because they understood. They knew this wedding wasn't just a union of two people. It was a powerful celebration of resilience, a testament to transformation, and a beacon of hope for anyone who has ever felt lost. The reception was an explosion of pure joy. The room was filled with laughter, vibrant music, and the most heartfelt toasts. My friends, the ones who had held my hand through the hardest times, stood up one by one, their faces beaming with pride as they celebrated not just my marriage, but my growth and my happiness. Family members shared sweet and funny stories of my journey, each one a gentle reminder of just how far I had come. It was incredible. Even people who didn't know our full story seemed to notice it. They saw the glow of a woman who had finally stepped into her own power and embraced her full potential. Later, as I danced with Chitty, enveloped in the warmth of his arms, I felt a profound sense of peace. This was a love I had earned. It was a joy I had fought for, through courage, through tears, and through a willingness to finally let go. This was my forever, and it was more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. After the wedding, Amarachi and Chitty moved into a home they had chosen together. Every single detail reflected their shared vision, harmony, love, and respect. Her daily life shifted into a new, beautiful rhythm. She focused on caring for herself, making sure her health was a priority. She was there for Chitty, building a true partnership of equals, supporting each other in everything they did. And for the first time, she embraced moments of joy and vulnerability without any fear. She finally understood that the journey that had once felt so painful, the betrayal, her own stubbornness, the isolation, and all the health struggles, it had all prepared her for this very moment. It was the foundation for the happiness she was now building. Soon, With their life together flourishing, Amarachi and Chitty began talking about starting a family. With her health fully restored, Amarachi felt confident and ready to bring a new life into their world. When she found out she was pregnant, the joy she felt was simply immeasurable. All those years of hardship and pain just faded into the background, replaced by the incredible miracle growing inside her. One evening, she held Chitty's hand, her eyes filled with happy tears, and whispered, "We made it. All of it. Everything we went through, it led us right here." Chitty smiled back, his own eyes brimming with emotion. "Yes," he said, "and together, we'll face whatever comes next with love and trust." Amarachi's life had truly come full circle. She had transformed from a stubborn, isolated young woman who pushed away advice to someone who finally embraced guidance, healing, and self-awareness. Now, she was a confident, loving partner and soon-to-be mother, ready to face the future with pure joy and courage. Along the way, she had learned lessons that would guide her for the rest of her life. Listening isn't a weakness, it's a strength. Trust is absolutely essential. Patience and humility have the power to transform hearts. And real love is always worth waiting for and nurturing. Months later, as Amarachi cradled her newborn baby in her arms, she looked up at Chitty and smiled. "This is everything I never thought I'd have," she whispered, her voice full of awe. Chitty leaned in and kissed her forehead gently. "No, Amarachi," he said softly. "This is everything you earned, through your growth, your courage, and your love." And in that quiet, perfect moment, Amarachi knew he was right. Her past no longer defined her. Her mistakes hadn't broken her. They had led her to wisdom. Her stubbornness hadn't been her downfall. It had been tempered into a quiet strength. And her heart, now fully healed, was finally ready to embrace life, love, and family completely. The journey had been long, and the lessons had been incredibly hard. But the life she was living now, a life filled with joy, trust, and a deep sense of fulfillment, was more beautiful than she had ever dared to